Hey class, I hope you are doing well right now. This is somewhat of the instructional video for Lab 8. This will take uh, 2 weeks to do, and it is a little bit different than the rest of our labs. This is more of a writing assignment than gathering data and then making graphs and interpreting it, and our general standard procedure for everything that we do in lab. So I'm going to try to explain this as in depth as I can, but make sure to read just about every word on this document. It'll help you make sense of everything. So you're going to be writing a research paper, a fairly brief research paper, about central versus peripheral fatigue. So if you don't know what that is, fatigue has two potential origins, so either being within the central nervous system or either being somewhat peripherally, so within, say, a skeletal muscle, for example. So you're going to be researching that. What I want this to be is 2 pages, double spaced. This does not include the reference section, so that is the length that I'm expecting, 2 pages, double spaced. And how I'm going to be grading it is through this rubric. So our papers are, our labs are typically worth 7.5 points. So this is how it's going to work. There's a focus and thesis aspect. There's a developing, competent, and accomplished level. There's also analysis and interpretation, so go ahead and read through these: developing, competent, accomplished. There's an organization and coherence, which you really should be able to get all of that as long as you follow the sections that I'm asking you to follow. Then there's an evidence and documentation. So a lot of that is going to be related to using the APA style, American Psychological Association. That's typically what we use. And if you don't understand how to do that, I'm going to explain that to you momentarily. Language use and conventions, that being our last section. So that is effectively me grading on, well, you know, grammar, punctuation, all of that type of stuff. So you have 2 weeks to write 2 pages. It will take a fair bit of research, so, you know, proofread it, make sure everything's good there. Now, granted, I'm not such a stickler on things like comma splices and things like that, so I won't try to grade you that hard on that. Now, let's get into these sections, and this should more or less get you all the points for organization and coherence. If you follow these now, if you don't time together in a proper way, then I could dock you a couple of, well, like half a point or so from there. So the sections are background, research, conclusions, pontifications, and references. So let's go through these one by one. So the background section, this section is where you're going to define fatigue, so the two particular origins of it. And I want you to use at least one peer-reviewed academic citation for that. And I want you to find this through PubMed or Google Scholar. I'm going to show you how to do that momentarily. One big thing: if you quote from a paper, I'm going to dock you points. In research, we never quote, we always paraphrase, so never use quotations. This should be in multiple paragraphs, and just a general note on writing. I want you to write everything I want you to write things in a way that provides enough information for an individual who is intelligent but is not in this class, who is not in exercise physiology. So that's the level that I want you to try to explain these things. And if you've never done an in-text citation, it looks somewhat like this. So right there, past research, yada, 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 right there. I'm not going to have any limitations on how old this research can be, so if you can find some research from the 30s, go ahead and use it. I'm fine with that. So that is what I want you to include in the background section. So multiple paragraphs, one citation is expected. Define central and peripheral fatigue, and um, multiple paragraphs within there, as much as you need. Keep in mind making up to the 2 pages double spaced. Next section, the research section. This is where you're actually going to read 3 different papers, and you're going to analyze them in a way. You're going to compare and contrast papers that investigated fatigue as it relates to exercise, sports performance, what have you, and you're going to compare and contrast their findings and the strength of research that they found, either leaning more towards central fatigue or peripheral fatigue. Now, there could be differences in, like, certain types of exercise might have more peripheral fatigue, other types might have more central fatigue. So I want you to read the research, try to understand that. There's a reason I'm giving y'all multiple weeks to figure all of this out, because if anybody's ever read any research papers before, it takes quite a while to go through them and understand them. But I'm expecting at least 3 papers to be cited within there. Next thing, conclusions. This section can be basically as short or as long as you want. So I want you to recap the main points about fatigue, like reiterate like central peripheral fatigue again, like why it's important, things of that nature, and then conclude which one is the most compelling based upon the research that you read and their reasoning behind it. So be it central or peripheral fatigue. And you can have your answer be kind of what I just said a few moments ago, that some exercise is more central, some exercise is more peripheral, or it's always central, or it's always peripheral. Whatever the research that you read directs you towards, that's what I want you to answer. The next part, there's a pontification section. So here's the question. Go ahead and read that, and I want you to address that. That's basically that. Okay, now for the references section. I expect you to use the APA style, and if you've never used that before, please go to the Purdue OWL. And I'm going to show you some things here momentarily that should help you with this. Make sure they're in alphabetical order and that you do a hanging indent. So if you've never done a hanging indent before, here let's highlight that. And well, it should be right there. I made it into a double spaced. I held down Control 2, both Control first, then 2. Now, if you're on Mac, Command 2 would probably be the thing that would do that. So if you've never done hanging indents before, come up to right here. There's a line and paragraph spacing. If you click down on that, there's line and spacing options. So if you look here, line, page breaks, whatever. That's kind of interesting. What orphan control? I'm not really sure what that means. But line spacing, we have different things, but special. We have a first line indent. We have a none. We have a hanging indent, which hanging indents is typically how we do like reference sections. So make sure to do that. Now, down here, just a couple of notes on APA style. Typically, this is how a citation works. There's names, and it's not alphabetical. It's how author names are set. It's within a lab. Typically, it has something to do with who did the most to the least work within there. But follow this. The italics are very important. The names, year, only the first letter is capital in the title, unless it's like a proper noun or something. Journal name, which is in italics, volume number, issue, not in italics, and then the pages. So it typically looks something like this. It's period, comma, period, comma. Most of the time people have their middle initial on these things. Year, fatigue and multiple sclerosis, archives and neurology, 45, not in italics, something like that. So if you've never done that, that's approximately how it should look, and it should be double spaced like that. That's how your references section should look, and it should be things in alphabetical order. Now, if for in-text citations, here's a couple of ways how to do it. So, Zeus et al. So if it's 3 or more authors, just do et al. That means and others. You could also write and colleagues, something like that. Reported that whatever happened, and there's a particular date there. Also, Smith did the same. That's another way to do it. If there's 2 authors, Smith and Jameson, 2016, words. And you can also have them just tagged in at the end of a sentence. So prior research has shown that, gosh, I can't believe some of the things I write. But here, and these are typically in alphabetical order whenever you have numerous ones. So notice here, Smith et al., 2017, and I believe that's a semicolon. I always forget if it's a semicolon or colon. And then another person. And that's how that works. Now, if you've never found research before, Google Scholar, this is where you want to go. You just would type in Google Scholar. It's, wow, you can see Schoology, Scholastic. Huh, interesting. Well, you can see kind of what I search for sometimes. So Google Scholar, right here, how you would look for something like this is, say we're interested in central fatigue and exercise and sports. Something like that. Hyperthermia and central fatigue during prolonged exercise in humans. This is probably an interesting study. If you're interested in particular years, we could, hey, just do since 2020, which I guess that's the year now. So that's pretty interesting. Here, let's go back just a little bit. You can find different papers on here. Oh, this J.M. Davis, this is a really good paper if you can get it. And you can just like click on these. You can download PDFs. You can read through their abstract, read through all of this. There's a lot going on here. So read through those, try to understand it. Now, here's something. Oh, University of Copenhagen. That's a good place. They have a lot of good research out of there. If you're interested in how to cite these things, right here, if you put your cursor over that site, you can click on that. APA, oh man, isn't that cool? You could just copy and paste that. And here, let's do it down here. Now, here is a particular problem with taking them from here, is they almost never have the journal name all capital, so you'll have to figure that out. So Journal of Applied Physiology, really big deal journal. You'll have to just do something like that. That would help with figuring out that research, but you'll have to read that. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. You'd have to read that paper in order to figure out what's really going on there. So it probably has something to do with high body temperature, central fatigue, kind of lower like output from the central nervous system, probably something like that. Okay. There's all of these other papers, but that is effectively how you would look any of that type of stuff up. And again, giving you numerous weeks to do this, back onto here. And if you have any questions, just send me an email, holler, and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. All right, have a good week.